Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sacred Warrior podcast. So, this episode is all about making decisions, not just little decisions, major life decisions. And all of us have had to do that at some point in our lives, or maybe you're right in the middle of that as well. And it's also about how to support others in making these major life decisions. Now, I'm going to be using the example of my son, Eli, with his permission, to share an experience that we had recently around supporting him and making the decision about what to do, at least with the next 12 months of his life. And should he go to college? Should he take a year off? And how best to support him in making that decision. And what was that like as a parent? And how has my work with my clients in making major life decisions informed my ability to be with my son in making that decision? There are some things that I learned along the way and had to very mindfully apply in this situation. And so I want to share with you what that experience is. What are some of the things that I learned, that I practiced to stay detached from the outcome and still very, very present with him. It was a huge shift, not even a shift. It was just a deepening of our relationship as a mother and son, and I'm so, so grateful for it. So I want to share with you today what I learned around that. Now, if you're listening to this on the podcast and you're just listening to it auditorily, you can check out on YouTube. I actually have the video of it as well so that you can see. I'm going to pull up Eli's chart here in just a minute. But also, if you are watching on YouTube, hi, good to see you. So, if you need more of a visual and you would like to have the visual, go check out the YouTube, and the link is in the show notes. All right, everybody. So, let's look just before we look at Eli's chart. What I would like to do is just take a few moments to talk about, again, some of the more high level principles and things that and practices and sort of how do they relate to design, and also how do they just relate to being a good listener. All right, so one of the things that became really clear to me, and this has been happening for years, but there's this thing I call mechanically hearing versus mechanical listening. So, what do I mean by that? Well, mechanically hearing to me means that I'm just hearing what someone is saying. I'm not really listening to all of the layers and levels. I'm actually I'm like, yeah, because I'm waiting for when they shut up so I can put my 2 cents in there. You know what I mean? And we all do this, by the way, right? We're not really listening to someone. We're just sort of like, yeah, finish your story so I can say something. Or we think that we know where this is going. We think that we know what the other person is saying. And so we're not really, really listening to them. And we're also sort of hearing, of course, because this is the way it goes, from our own point of view, from our own filter, our own lens. This is not new news. Everybody kind of knows this on some level, but there's something that I really noticed, a practice that I use and used with Eli. I use all the time with my clients, but I really got to see it in this context with Eli because the thing is that it's one thing to be a clinician, a therapist or a coach, or someone who is serving others and being able to be detached to the outcome. I mean, that to me is like that's the whole thing. I mean, that's why people come to, that's why I hire a coach. I don't want their fucking opinion. I want them to be detached enough so that I don't want them to be more attached to my success and outcome than I am. You know what I mean? And if they are, then where's my space to actually really explore what is going on inside of me. Okay, so that's kind of a given, right? Like we don't have an attachment as a, like again, as a therapist or coach, ideally. But when it comes to our family members, especially our kids, it can be really, really challenging to stay detached from the outcome. And so what happens is that we're hearing through this lens of a construct, and the construct is what we think is the right thing to do, what worked for us. We're thinking about things in terms of, well, what will people think if you do this, or like all our own shit in a lot of ways. And it's not just our own shit, like our shadows, but it is also all of the constructs of, this is what you're supposed to do. You go to high school and then you go to college and then you get a job, da, da, da. And a lot of that, I have so many clients. Let me put it this way. I have a lot of clients who come to me and they say, yeah, I went to school and then I got out of school and I got a degree in this, but then I got a job doing this and I just sort of like fell into it. I went with the flow. I just went with the flow. And now I'm like in my 30s, late 30s, 40s, 50s. And I'm like, is this all there is? Is this all there is? Because they were following the banks of the river and the flow that society said this is the banks of the river, right? The construct, the beliefs create the banks of the river. And are we flowing? What are the banks that we're flowing in? And I really believe that we have to examine the banks of the river because our flow is really determined by the river that we're in, and whose constructs and where did we pick those up from? And are we even consciously aware that those constructs are there and that we are flowing in them, right? And you'll see sometimes we spill over, we got to go this way. And it's like, oh, no, 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 got to get back into the construct, right? And so I had to, as a parent, really examine and set aside the banks of the river, my banks of the river, that I am like, well, this is what I did. And I got to tell you, like, that's not very hard for me to do because I am very much, after doing this work for over 10 years with human design, over 20 years as a clinician, I have developed a sense of, okay, I don't know what the answer is for you. Let's look at your design. Let's see what's flowing. Let's see what your gifts and strengths are. Let's go with that. I don't have the answer. You have the answer. And I have been able to apply that also to my kids and look at the banks of the river that I have been raised in and make sure that I'm not trying to get my kids to to go down my river, and to find their own way and to go find those tributaries and to go create the banks of their river. And I make it sound really easy. There's times where I'm like, like, oh shit. And I want the best for them, just like all parents want the best for their kids, all healthy parents. So so the thing that I come to when I think about this, mechanically hearing, is as soon as I find myself in that, like, oh, I'm just like hearing and I'm thinking, I'm in my head too much about what he's saying. Well, again, we're talking about Eli here. I'm in my head, I'm like, oh, you shouldn't, da da da, or what will people think, all that stuff that's up there, or this is what you should do because if you don't, then oh my God, bad things will happen. Like, oh my God, what if you don't get a college degree? Like, look at how many, look at how many people are super successful and they don't have a college degree, right? And our family is we have a lot of education in our family. There's, that's something that a lot of people in our family have college degrees and have professional degrees and further education as well. So it's something that is of value in our household, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily right for my kids, our kids. I don't know. And the world is changing so much. So I got to keep all of that. I'm keeping all of that in my head as I'm listening, and kind of letting it just like be there but move to the back. It's like, oh, there you are, okay, move to the back. What is really happening, and being present with Eli, or the client, or our daughter Anya, and being with that person, what's really happening over there. And again, so much easier to do with a client or maybe a friend where you don't have any vested interest. They're not your blood, like they're not, you didn't give birth to them. It's so much easier to have that detachment there. So when it is your child, you got to work a little bit harder at that and really see, again, examine your own biases. Now, what do I mean by mechanical listening? So in human design, there are the mechanics of the design. It's like, this is the way the energy flows in the design, or doesn't flow. And as a practitioner and as an instructor of design, I see the mechanics of the design, right? I can look at a design, and I have this chart right here, and I'll share it in just a little bit, but I can look at the design and I can see the mechanics that are going on and the energy flows. And so what's happening is I'm listening to, and I've talked about this actually in a training I did about using human design as a diagnostic tool and an assessment and intervention tool. This is what I mean by mechanical listening, is that I'm listening to, in this case, Eli. I'm listening to Eli, and I'm listening to the keynotes that he's saying. I'm listening to the words that he's saying. I'm being very present with the words that he's saying and the energy that I feel and the emotions that are there, and kind of how I'm feeling in my body. But I have another thing that's happening, and that is that I have his design not permanently emblazoned on my brain, but there are certain aspects of his design, the mechanics of his design, that I know. For instance, that he's a generator, that he's a triple split, that he is an emotional generator. He has to wait for emotional clarity as his authority, that he is a 2-4 profile, right? All of these things I'm holding in my head, and I'm also holding a couple channels in my head that I know. And again, we'll look at his chart here in a few minutes. But I'm listening to the words he's saying, and I'm listening with the image of his design there too. And I'm listening for the mechanics. I'm listening for where there's flow in his design, like he's really actually in the flow and he doesn't realize it, or he's out of flow, like he's in the shadows of his design. For instance, he has his ajna undefined, and he has gate 24 in his unconscious sun. He replays things over and over again. I know that, right? So when he's replaying things and he's feeling anxious, I I know that. I know the mechanics part of his design. And so I can set aside what how do I want to put this? I can set aside like what I think he should do and just be with the mechanics and see how I can be and stand alongside the mechanics of his design, whether or not I have them in my design or not, and see if we can't work with those mechanics to get that energy flowing in a way that has a release, that has some clarity move in, right? So I know my design well enough to know how I operate, and I know his design well enough, again, not memorized, well enough to be able to listen for the mechanics and what's going on, and then be able to support him based on his energy and his design. So there's a couple layers of listening that are happening there. And what occurs in that is so much grace, so much compassion, so much non-judgment. It just happens for me. It happens naturally. It's sort of like, this is the way it works. But there's not, but I also want to have this caveat. It's not like, well, this is just the way you're designed, buddy. So blah, 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 blah. Get over it. No, no. And that's how a lot of people talk about design, which it really bugs me. There is we have to be able to embrace the paradox of our design. Their design is a this and a that. There's all these binaries and paradoxes in the design. And most people talk about and teach design from this or that. Well, you're just this, or you're just that, or this is how it is. And it's like, well, yeah, on one level, yeah, that's true. We're talking just purely at the mechanical level, like just if you just went to mechanics and you looked at the design, yeah. But we're also so much more than just that one little part of design and the one point of view of it, right? One side of the binary of it. It's also this one. And the truth lie and the freedom and the liberation lies somewhere in the middle. And this is the ability to embrace paradox in the design. And if we can't embrace the paradox of our own design, it can be more challenging to embrace it in others. Again, especially people that we love, that, we have a vested interest in them surviving. I love my son. I'm actually excited that for what he's choosing to do and that I get to spend some more time with him. But also I want him to fly free. I want him to, go out and experience the world. I don't necessarily want him to be, living in my house at, 25, 30 years old. Like, go fly free, buddy. Like, be your awesome self out in the world. You know what I mean? So, okay. So mechanically hearing versus mechanical listening. So that's one level of it. Another level, I have this word that I made up when I think about human design. It is psychosocial, spiritual, energenetics. Psycho, social, spiritual, energenetics. Because that's really what design is. It is the psychology, it is how we process things mentally, our fears, it's the emotions, it's a spiritual connection. Like, we have a soul, we have a spirit that is inhabiting this human form. And our design is our vehicle, the human form, and the interface between our soul and our human form in this lifetime. That is huge. Having done Akashic record work and looking at soul design and human design in this lifetime, there's always a beautiful, perfect fit. Like, the human design always matches and supports the soul design at a larger level. Energy, and then genetics. We're talking about genetics. And so here's something, around this genetic continuity, which is that there are aspects of Eli's design that I have, and that his dad has. And he's inherited that. And that's true for all of us. So when we're looking at, our children and or our parents, and sometimes our siblings, we're looking at a genetic continuity there. And there are aspects of my design that I can see in Eli and aspects of his design that activate mine. And again, when we are in a more objective relationship with people, again, as a client, as a clinician, as a therapist, as a coach, as a provider, it's easier to kind of play with that energy and not get as sucked into it. But when it is, very, again, this blood connection, and even, could also be adopted connection, but we've invested, right, our time, energy, and, love and genetics into this. There, it can be a little bit harder to see. And yet, when we do look at the design and we see this genetic continuity, again, this is that a part of that mechanical listening. It's like, oh, this isn't, it's personal in that we have it in our design, but it's not personal in the way of the way our mind makes up a story about it being personal. Okay, so that's the other piece of it. Is there are certain things that I share with Eli that I was able to I understand. And then there are certain, again, activations that he and I share that are that used to be super triggering or activating for me before I understood his design and my design. And now I can be with those activations or triggers in a totally different way. So that's huge. So one of the other things is, and I've kind of touched on this, but I just want to make it very explicit, is, I call it know thyself. Just like on the Oracle at Delphi, know thyself, right? That was carved into the stone there. And know their self too. In other words, part of the thing about learning about our design, and I have, again, several programs that really help people to understand their design. There's the art of the chart, and then there's also in the Builder Revolution Sacred Warrior Intensive, if you're generator, manifesting generator, really understanding the mechanics of your design, being able to look at a chart, and not only your own chart but other people's charts, and see what's going on there. And so know thyself and their self too. I, again, coming back to this conversation with Eli, is like, I know myself. I know how I get activated. I know enough. And the reason I want to say I know enough, Eli asked me this when we were looking at his chart over lunch. And he said, Mom, do you like look at Anya, his sister, Anya's chart and my chart like all the time? And I said, no, I don't, buddy. Some people do that. They're constantly looking at other people's charts, and that's fine. That there's nothing wrong with that. I look at it as I'm I know it enough, and I kind of have one of those memories where I can see an image, and I'm a very visual person, so I can conjure up the image of a chart. Sometimes I forget people's names, but I remember their chart. I mean, that's kind of how visual I am. I'm an artist too, so I guess that makes sense. Um, but I said, no, I don't like sit there and look at your chart every single day, every single conversation. Because again, this takes me to another one of the points is I I want to be present with him. What's really going on for him? That said, I do know enough about his chart and my chart together to be able to, again, listen mechanically, as I was saying before, and which allows me to step back and watch my biases, watch my constructs, watch my fears, watch my banks of my river, so that I can stay in my flow, but also let him flow within the banks of his river. In a lot of ways, that's how I see the designs, I guess. I just came up with that. I didn't even, it's a metaphor that seems to be working for me in this moment. So it's like know thyself and their self too. And then in a way, when you're being with them, kind of let go of it and be present, right? I think sometimes what we can do as practitioners and parents is that we're like, okay, and whether it's human design or some other personality thing or the Enneagram or whatever, it becomes the only filter that we look at someone through. And then it becomes myopic, right? It's like, okay, well, your design is this, da, 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 da. When people, I mean, I cringe at that. I'm kind of like, all right, obviously I'm committed to design. I've been doing this for over 10 years. I love it. I learn it. I teach it. I live it. I support people in it. I coach. All of it, right? I use it in therapy, and I am really aware that this person across from me or alongside me in the car, having these conversations is so much more than that. And so okay, I got that in the back of my mind. And I'm also being present. And that means that I've got to, again, as soon as a thought comes up or a fear comes up, I'm like, okay, I see you. I'm going to set you aside and be present. Where is this person in this moment? And how am I being truly fully with them? Or am I hearing things and going, oh my God, I got to fix that. Or, oh my God, I got to address that. Even there were times where I was listening through the lens of his design and I just stayed quiet. He wasn't, that wasn't appropriate in that moment to share that with him. That wasn't what he needed to hear in that moment. That's what I'm talking about, being present. Who, it doesn't matter how much you know about their design or any other, again, personality or something like that. Like, if assessment, if you're not being present with them, it doesn't matter. Like, there's, so it's so interesting how mechanically listening allowed me to be more present, but also detached about sharing it until it was the right moment, or if there was a right moment to do that. I hope that makes sense. Um, Going back to the last thing I want to say is going back to this idea of, the constructs that we are living in this conditioning field. Going back to making a decision, when we're looking at design, right, our authority, our inner authority, most people have an inner authority. There's just a couple who don't, right? The reflectors, who have to wait that 28, 29-day cycle, and mental projectors have it'll even says inner authority none, but it actually is that they have to, soundboard. And so their mental authority is, it's not that they're making decisions based on what they think. It's a totally different process. And so if you're a mental projector and you don't understand that, reach out. I have some, resources for you. Okay. So most of us have an inner authority, again, especially generators, manifesting generators, and that inner authority is our sacral. And then if we have to wait for emotional clarity, then waiting for emotional clarity is that next piece of it. And Eli's design is one of, again, he is a pure or classic generator, and he also has his emotion center defined, and he has to wait for emotional clarity. So we're going to take a quick little break. And then when we come back, I'm going to pull up Eli's chart and we will look at his design a little bit deeper, and just show you some of the things that I shared with him to support him in making a really big decision. Does he go to school like planned, or does he take a year off? All right, I'll see you when we get back.
Hey, Sacral Warriors. I'd like to invite you into a really cool experience. It's called the Sacral Warrior Activation. It's $9. It's 9 videos, 9 short videos that go through all the gates, I call them energy valves, of the sacral, and help you to assess where you may be leaking your potent sacral energy and what to do about it. And if you are excited about that content and you want to dive even deeper, then you could join us in the Builder Revolution, where it's basically you get a couple programs inside this larger program with lifetime access to live coaching twice a month, where you get to ask questions and see how other generators and manifesting generators are building deeply satisfying lives, relationships, and businesses. I hope to see you in the global sacral revolution. Now, back to our show.
Hey, everyone, welcome back. So in this section, I want to go ahead and pull up Eli's chart and talk a little bit about how how did I support him, and how was I doing that mechanical listening. So let me grab his chart here, and so y'all can see it. And again, if you're listening to this on the podcast, an image of the chart is on the show notes page. So let's see here. Okay. So a couple things that I was listening for is, number one, just noting how is he thinking about this? And one of the things that I do know about, I knew about him, again, generator, number one, generator. So he operates in a step by step way, and it's waiting to respond, right? We know his strategy, waiting to respond. And that as an emotional authority, that it's going to take time, that his truth is revealed over time. Okay. So just right off the bat, I know those things about him. I also am aware as a 2-4 profile that that second line is I joke around and I say it's kind of like you know how a vampire can look in the myth goes that a vampire can look in the mirror and not see its own reflection, but then other people can see it. So it's sort of like, oh, you can see me, and doesn't mean second lines are vampires. It's just an analogy or metaphor, or whatever. It's kind of like they don't see themselves. They don't see themselves clearly. They're naturally good at things, but they don't necessarily see that in themselves. So you can tell them all day long, oh, you're really good at this and you're really good at that. They'll just be like, okay. And as we're, whatever you say, right? And, or they may recognize it a little bit, but it's not, the truth for them is not because you're saying it, it's because they're just being it. And even if it's in the conscious, here in his profiles, the second line is conscious, even then he may not really be fully aware of it. And this is something we're diving really deep into in the art of profile, and it's just fascinating to unravel the profile at the level of all the role gates, and sort of undo the threads there. But that makeup profile, because it's such a rich amount of information just in the profile itself. So, but going back to that, I'm like, thinking in my head, I'm listening through the mechanics, generator, step by step. All he needs to know is what's the next step. So in my mind, I'm thinking, how do I help him navigate the next step? Now, one of the things that he was saying is, he was kind of like, this isn't a decision that will impact the rest of my life. Like, this is, what if I decide to do this and then I'm going down this route for the rest of my life and I never get to go, I go to college and then I get out and I get a job and then, I get married, I have kids, and then I'm like doing the same job and I don't even like it. And I was just like, oh God, that doesn't sound fun at all, and yet that's what, as I mentioned earlier, like kind of that's a lot of what we do. It's sort of like, here are the constructs, you do that, this is the river banks on which you're here to flow into. And he's kind of like, but I don't like those riverbanks. And I'm like, yeah, no problem, buddy. Like, that's okay. What we want to do is find out, what is your next step? Yes, will this decision make an impact and a ripple effect in his life? Absolutely. Every decision we make has a ripple effect. But if we let that stop us, if we let that get in the way, then we'll never choose anything, right? So I come back to, where is the truth in his body, right? It's not going to be in his mind. We don't make decisions through the mind. We make it, in most of us, especially generators and manifesting generators, in our body through our sacral response and or waiting for emotional clarity, just like him. So as I mentioned earlier, the truth is in his body, in his emotions, but he's riding this wave up and down and up and down and up and down. And part of what's going on in that wave up and down is that he is, having this gate 24 here, which is his unconscious son. Gate 24 is this gate that just replays things over and over and over again until it comes to sort of a place of like, okay, that makes sense. I can rest there. It's like constantly replaying things. And so I also was holding that in my mind as I'm listening to him. He'd have these moments of emotional clarity, like, oh, this feels right. But then immediately that 24 would come in and go, but what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And of course, also, the other gates up there in the ajna there, the 47 and the 4, which are, there's a mental anxiety that's in the ajna and all the gates in there. And we have fears and anxieties built into the design. And so again, without going into all of that with him, he doesn't need to know that in that moment. That is not going to serve him to know all that. He's in his wave, right? But I'm holding that so that I can go, okay, all right, your mind keeps jumping in. Let's go to another level of a way to help him get connected to his body. All right. So again, let's go back to the mechanics for a moment. He's a triple split definition. Now, it just so happens that just so you know, what is a triple split, right? So I like to think of these as like islands of energy, right? So we have the throat center directly connected to the G center through this channel right here, the 1333. Then he has his heart center directly connected to his spleen and then also to his emotions, right? So his willpower is informed by his emotions and his instinctual response. And that's another island of energy. And then the third one is his sacral is directly connected to the root center through this channel, the 5342. So, but you'll see that these little islands are not connected to each other, right? Now, it just so happens that I bridge his splits. So I have gate 21, I have gate 6, I have gate 50. So I bridge his split. So when he and I are together, he becomes a single definition. So he's able to access all of those parts together when we are together because that's how our designs talk to each other. Okay. So again, I'm kind of holding that in my mind and I'm thinking to myself, what are some of the things in his design that I know, like the mechanics of it, and that I can help him navigate. So one of them is a design hack. I call it a design hack because it's not the way he makes decisions. He is an emotional authority, right? That is his decision making. However, he does have his heart center defined. And it just so happens, not only does he have it defined, he has it connected directly to his solar plexus through this channel, the 3740. So, one of the design hacks that I share with my clients is if they have this willpower, heart center defined, this ego center defined, um, if what I'll say is, okay, truth, is your heart in it? Is your heart in it? Because this is an incredible center of willpower. And if this person's heart, in this case Eli, if his heart is in it, he'll be able to do it, no problem. But if his heart isn't in it, oh God, it's like pulling teeth. He may do it, but at a cost to his own physical heart, to his own, sense of self. Really, not sense of self in the same way that our G center is our sense of self, but like, his heart, right? And so we look at this, and I'm asking him questions, and I took him through a guided visualization that was like, you have two paths, right? Yes, go to school right now. And again, it's what is the next step? We're just looking at the next step, not what are you going to do with the rest of your life, right? Just what is the decision that is on the table right now? What is your next step, right? So that is the visualization. And the two options were start school, in August, or at least take a year off. Okay. Not take forever off, not just, but like travel. He wanted to travel. And it just felt like a year was a nice time. Like he could defer his, going to college for a year, right? And still have his acceptance, his admissions be accepted. So it was like, okay, what's the next step? Your life is, you're already on your path. You can't screw it up. Your path is your path. And we use our design to help us to navigate our path, to follow our path, and also understand that there's going to be times that we're going to go off our path a little bit, but we always seem to come back to it. That's why I say you can't screw this up. Like you really can't. you know? I mean, you have to try really, really hard to get off track. People do it, but the cool thing about it is that it doesn't take much to get back on track. As soon as you start to really become more attuned to your own design, getting back on track is very quick. So with him, the visualization that I took him through was, okay, imagine that you're on your path in your life, and we don't know where that's going. You're 17 years old. You don't need to know where that's going, but there's a part of your body that's partly your sacral and also your emotions and, other aspects of your design that kind of know what you're here to do and to be and experience. So we're going to tap into that. It's not your brain. It's not your mind. It has no idea. It thinks it knows. It has no idea. So let's get into the body. All right. I took him through it. It was like, okay, imagine that you start school in a month. I bring you back to Montana in a month and you start school. What are you seeing? What are you experiencing? How are you breathing? Notice your posture, right? He has his eyes closed. He's imagining he's doing that. He's giving himself, his whole body, the full experience of that, even in his imagination, because the body doesn't actually know, if he's really imagining it, the body doesn't know whether it's really happening or not, right? But it's going with the imagination. And he was like, it just feels constricted. We watch Stranger Things in our household. And he said, it feels like the upside down. It feels like that red storm in the upside down in Stranger Things. And what's really wild is that we're driving on the highway and I'm just guiding him through this. And I immediately thought of that right before he said it. In my body, I'm sort of tracking how how I feel about it as he's imagining. I'm in the field with him. This is a co-created field, right? And I immediately thought of Stranger Things. I thought about the upside down. I thought of that too. And when he verbalized it, I was like, oh my gosh, I got the same kind of feeling in my body. But this isn't about me. So I didn't, I wasn't sharing that right away. I was like, okay, cool, got it. Because I don't want to influence him at all in this moment, which I could easily do is oh, I got that same thing. Okay. No, it's just like, all right, cool. Got it. All right. So let's back out. Now I want you to imagine that you take the year off and you travel. How does that feel? And he's like, oh, it feels like green and lush and I can breathe and it feels really good. And also in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, red light, green light, like there's all these, the body knows, the body is showing us all the time. And so again, I just kept that to myself for a moment without sharing because I really wanted him to have that experience on his own so that he knows that his body is giving him information. And then I asked him, okay, based on that, what feels like the right decision for you to make right now? And he's like, well, I want to say not to go, but what about this? And what if I'm wrong? And da da da. And I was like, okay, cool, got it. Oh, hi, gate 24. You just popped in again, didn't you? Right. So at that point, this is where I was, in the space. He wasn't in a super elevated emotional state. It was a calm conversation. And at that point, I just educated him a little bit about, his design and how it works. And that was really helpful for him. And so basically my request to him was, hey, we're all ready to this situation, right? This orientation for college. My request of you, just to really make sure, it sounds like you've got some clarity in your body. It sounds like you kind of already know. My request is that we go to orientation and you go through orientation fully and completely and engage fully and completely and see how your body feels from there. You're not locked into any decision right now. You don't have to say yay or nay right now. And of course, he's like, well, I don't want to because I don't want it. Feels like a waste of time. I'm like, yeah, maybe, maybe not. But if you go ahead and give yourself the experience and then really see how it feels once you're there, you're on campus, you're talking about it, you're registering for classes, you're going to get so much more information there. And then you'll really know for sure what the decision, the right decision is for you. And that's exactly what we did. And then we talked about it afterwards. And he was really clear. He was like, I feel really bad because I made this decision a year ago to apply because I kind of felt like I should, even though I wasn't really sure if I wanted to go to school. And now here we are a month away. And I don't, is it okay for me to not go? And I was like, of course it's okay for you to not go. His that emotional wave takes time. It is clarity over time, right? And just giving him the space, and most of the anxiety he was experiencing was because he felt like he should, because he felt like he was supposed to, because the riverbanks were already laid out, even though he wasn't emotionally clear about whether or not he wanted to swim in that river or not. And so by giving him some space to go, let's expand the banks of the river, let's actually explore some tributaries of this river. And yes, the river is a metaphor for the emotions as well. Let's see how we ride that wave. Let I'm gonna let that the river like maybe overflow a little bit. And it's okay if you experience really strong emotions in here and all the thoughts of like, well, what will people think? I told everybody I was going. Yeah, okay, got it. You did. And it's okay, right? So it was a hugely powerful conversation and experience for both of us. I learned so much from him. I mean, triple split, two for this kid is one of the most sensitive, intuitive, gentle, amazing, badass, the coolest people I know. Like his insights and his ability to express himself is just like, wow, wow, wow. I'm totally blown away over and over again. So he taught me a lot. He taught me a lot about himself. He taught me a lot about how emotions work and this heart. Oh, the last thing I wanted to share with you all is about the 5342. And I have this channel also. And the 5342 is all about cycles. So is this 1333. But this 5342 is a really powerful one when it comes to cycles, because it's all about cycles and it's the format channel for cycles. And so what I told him is, it sounds like you just completed a cycle of high school. Because what he was saying is, I don't want to go back to school right now. I just got done with school. I don't want to go back. I have zero desire to go back into studying things, which is also in a lot of ways very second line. Because again, a very natural way of being. He's not like a first line, right? First line's like investigating. I mean, I'm a 5-1. I'm like, ooh, get me to school as fast as possible. I can't wait. I'm such a nerd that way. But for him, he's like just wants to do what he's natural at, right? And he doesn't even know that he's doing that. So what I said to him is, hey, here's the thing. You're just completing a cycle and you're not, it sounds like you're not quite ready to start another cycle that involves school. And he was like, yeah, that makes sense. And I said, it sounds like what your heart is into and the cycle that you want to start is this one of, working, saving up some money and traveling. And he's like, yeah, that lights me up. That I have energy for that, right? This is directly connected. This is, root energy, fueled into the sacral. And believe me, I have started cycles where it was like, I don't know if okay, I should do this, or everybody expects me to do this. And guess what? I quit. I ended up quitting. And I talked to him about that. I talked to him about the mechanics of that cyclical thing and saying, if you don't have energy to start this cycle in this way, then that is not the right decision for you. So there was another layer in there. And maybe some of you who are looking at this chart, you see even more layers. There's so many layers. He and I talked about a lot of different things, and I'm keeping it fairly short here, just for sake of brevity in the podcast, and to keep it at as high a level as I can. But I just want to point out, a couple things. Number one is, as a parent, being able to look at and be with my son in this way. And I've known their designs for years, and my daughter, the same thing. She's a very different person. I am with her in a different way than I am with my son. Why? Because we activate each other in a different way, but because she's a different person. She's a different profile, different incarnation cross. She's a manifesting generator. I mean, all these things. Yeah, they share some things, but some aspects of their design, but they're very different people. And when we are in the field together, I am activated in different ways, and so are they. And so I keep that in my mind when I'm interacting with my kids and supporting them in making decisions that are correct for them and their design. This is so huge. So many of us as parents are just like, how do I help them be the best, happy? We just want our kids to be happy. Guess what? It's not by doing what you fucking did necessarily, unless that's in alignment for them. It's about helping them to understand what are their gifts and strengths. What are the ways for them to navigate their life? They navigate their life through their type, strategy, and authority. Even if they didn't know anything else about their design, even if you don't know anything else about their design, type, strategy, and authority, boom, you're navigating life. Then we again add in profile, we add in the incarnation cross, we add in the different aspects of the design, and it gets richer, right? So you can keep it very simple, and deeply profound. And I got to tell you, one of the proudest moments for me, I mean, there's been many with my kids, but after that whole experience, Eli said to me, not just once, but a couple times, Mom, thank you so much. I'm so grateful that I have parents like you and Dad that allow me to express myself, to explore things, to make decisions on my own, and that you're willing to help me to do that. It really means a lot. I'm so grateful. I don't even have words. And he said that several times, and I was just like, okay, wow, that is it. It's like the banks of his river. He's finding his river, and his river is in his design. And yeah, there's some banks of our rivers that overlap, but he really has his own. And any way that I can support him and our daughter in finding their path and navigating their waterways, emotionally and in their purpose and through the way their energy flows and their design, that's to me what parenting is about. And again, whether you're talking about this with your partner, or you're looking at it for your own self, or you're looking at it for your own clients, and that, this is huge. It's huge. It's absolutely life changing. So, if any of this struck a nerve and you would like to know more, again, check out chrisprochaska.com. We've got training on the art of the chart and art of profile, art of partnerships, and also in the Builder Revolution and the Sacred Warrior Intensive, which is really more geared towards life and business coaching for generators and manifesting generators. And I have a lot of parents who come to me, educators as well, and really seeing how we can use this to not just know ourselves, but to support those that we love, and sometimes have a difficult time being objective with. But the design and the mechanics there can help us to get that space and to love the dynamic that's happening there, and trust. Like, I have implicit trust in my kids' designs and their purpose, even if it doesn't look anything like mine. And especially because it doesn't look anything like mine. And they have a lot to learn from me, and I have a lot to learn from them. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening or watching. And again, check out chrisprochaska.com. And until next time, take care.